Imagine spending 20 years in a 30-room palace only to be dragged out while screaming that it's your birthright to stay. Last month, the world watched in shock as the final traces of royal protection for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor didn't just vanish, they were insinuated. No more titles, no more Duchess by his side, and on his 66th birthday, no more freedom. As police sirens wailed through the quiet woods of Sandringham, the fallen royal was bundled into an unmarked car for an 11-hour interrogation that changed everything. He was supposed to be hiding away in a shoebox farmhouse, but instead he's facing a life sentence in a much smaller room. But what exactly did the police find during their midnight raid that turned a quiet exile into a national scandal?
Former Prince Andrew, we need to say now, has been kicked out of his salubrious Royal Lodge home, the 30-room mansion that he was living in with his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. However, he's going to end up in Sandringham. He has been exiled to Norfolk by the King after his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
The 30-room luxury of Royal Lodge was never just a home for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, it was his final fortress of relevance. But in the early hours of February 2026, that fortress officially fell. After years of resisting the King's orders, the man once known as the Duke of York was reportedly forced out in a scene that was anything but dignified. Witnesses describe a chaotic departure under the cover of darkness, with Andrew reportedly shouting that it was his birthright to stay, while removal vans cleared out 2 decades of his life. But the real shock wasn't just that he was leaving, it was where he was going. While the world expected a quiet transition, the reality was a desperate scramble for shelter. Because his permanent relocation to Marsh Farm was delayed by extensive repairs, Andrew was pushed into a temporary stopgap at Wood Farm, a secluded cottage that offered privacy but zero comfort. For a man who spent his life surrounded by servants, the sudden silence of the Norfolk marshes was a deafening reminder of how far he had fallen. And then the situation turned truly volatile. Just as he was settling into his temporary exile, the unthinkable happened. On February 19th, his 66th birthday, the quiet of the Sandringham estate was shattered by the arrival of unmarked police cars. This wasn't a birthday visit from the family, it was an 11-hour interrogation that would change the course of his life forever. The authorities weren't just asking about the past, they were focused on new, explosive allegations of misconduct in public office that had been buried for years. The birthday arrest sent shockwaves through the monarchy, but it also revealed a much darker secret about his new living arrangements. While the police were questioning him, the true state of his future home at Marsh Farm was being exposed. It turns out the palatial retirement the public imagined was actually a race against time and nature.
Marsh Farm, it's a ramshackle place, it's run down. Is he going to be happy there, Arthur?
Well, I mean, people describe the Sandringham estate as not very nice, but I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's just tree-lined, it's absolutely where that...
King Charles didn't just evict his brother from a palace, he moved him into what locals are calling a manure-soaked shoebox. While Marsh Farm was sold to the public as a quiet country retreat, the reality on the ground in Norfolk is starting to look more like a calculated humiliation. Within days of the relocation being finalized, staff were reportedly seen dumping tons of foul-smelling agricultural waste just yards from the front door. It wasn't an accident, it was a clear signal that the era of royal deference is dead. But the stench is the least of his worries. Marsh Farm sits in a treacherous Flood Zone 3 area, where the only thing standing between the living room and the marshland is an aging pumping station that has been flagged for mechanical failure. Despite the emergency renovations, the house remains a functional red brick agricultural building that has sat empty for years. Even with the newly installed 6-foot wooden fences and high-tech CCTV, the property feels less like a home and more like a high-security holding cell. The isolation is becoming physical too. In a move that shocked royal observers, an invisible barrier was recently activated around the farm, a strict no-fly zone to block any drones from capturing what's happening inside. It's a level of security usually reserved for active military sites, yet Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is reportedly trapped inside with little to do. Rumours from within the estate suggest he is spending his days playing combat video games like Call of Duty to pass the time, barred by royal aides from even his favourite hobby, horse riding. The message from the palace is loud and clear: you are to be seen as little as possible. But while Andrew is being kept under what feels like a form of a state arrest, his former companion is already planning the ultimate escape. Sarah Ferguson hasn't just distanced herself from the scandal, she's looking at a one-way ticket to a place where her royal history still carries the weight of gold. Moving into Marsh Farm was supposed to be a quiet transition, but Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's first week in Norfolk was met with a literal stinking blow. Just as he arrived at his temporary quarters at Wood Farm, local residents watched as tractors hauled tons of raw agricultural manure to a spot just 200 yards from his front door. It wasn't a mistake. It was a routine farm operation that served as a brutal reminder of his new reality. He is no longer shielded by the manicured gardens of Windsor. He is now living in the middle of a working farm, where the smells of the countryside are unavoidable. But the manure was only the beginning of a much larger isolation. For decades, Sarah Ferguson was the one constant in his world, living alongside him at Royal Lodge despite their long-ago divorce. That era is officially over. While Andrew remains trapped in the Norfolk marshes under the watchful eye of police investigators, Sarah Ferguson has reportedly been spotted thousands of miles away in Dubai. Sources claim she is fleeing the fallout, meeting with business contacts in the Middle East where her history still carries a shred of respect. The image is stark. While she seeks a fresh start in high-end international circles, Andrew is left alone with only a skeleton staff of 2, a chef and a valet. The king has reportedly agreed to pick up the tab for these servants, but the multi-million-pound security detail that once protected him is gone. In its place is a team of private guards and a local police force that just days ago held him in an interrogation room for 11 hours. The man who once had the world at his feet is now counting down the days until he can move into a 5-bedroom farmhouse that the public has dubbed the Royal Doghouse. Even his favorite hobbies have become a source of controversy. Despite the ongoing criminal investigation, reports have surfaced that a stable block near Marsh Farm is being frantically refurbished. It seems the former prince is determined to continue his horse-riding habit even as the government discusses stripping him from the line of succession entirely. But as the renovations at the farmhouse near completion, a new and much more dangerous threat is emerging from the wetlands nearby. If the rodents and the manure were a social humiliation, what's coming next is a physical threat that no amount of royal security can stop. Marsh Farm doesn't just sit on a floodplain, it is positioned in Flood Zone 3, a designation given to areas with the highest probability of catastrophic water damage. Local experts have issued a prudent warning that the only thing keeping the property dry is the Wolferton pumping station. If those pumps fail for even a few hours during a North Sea surge, the ground floor of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's new home could become part of the limitless ooze that defines the Norfolk coastline. The danger is so real that the Environment Agency has officially advised residents in the area to register for emergency flood alerts. Imagine the scene. A man who once lived behind the high stone walls of Windsor Castle, now sleeping with a government-issued flood pager on his nightstand. Renovations are currently focused on installing 6-foot security fences, but those wooden slats won't do a thing when the marshland decides to reclaim the soil. In fact, a recent flood risk assessment just meters from the property concluded that mechanical breakdown or power supply failure at the station is a constant residual risk. But while the water rises outside, the financial floodgates are opening inside the palace. It's recently been revealed that King Charles is reportedly footing the entire bill for this relocation, from the Sky TV and high-speed Wi-Fi to the extensive security upgrades. Insiders estimate the cost of keeping Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor out of sight in this Norfolk marshland is running into the millions. It's a staggering price to pay for a man who officially holds no public role, and it's raising a question that is starting to rattle the very foundations of the monarchy. As the wettest winter on record continues to batter the UK, the royal doghouse at Marsh Farm is looking less like a home and more like a liability. The potholes on the access road are already filling with muddy rainwater, making every trip to the property a treacherous journey. But as the physical world closes in on Andrew, a final thought-provoking truth is emerging about his place in the new royal order. The image of a fallen prince living in a rat-infested, flood-prone farmhouse isn't just a story about a bad move. It's the final visual of a monarchy being ruthlessly modernized. King Charles hasn't just distanced himself from his brother, he's effectively built a high-security wall around him, one that the public can't see and the press can't fly over. Marsh Farm was never meant to be a retirement home, it was designed to be a vanishing point. As the high tide warnings continue to flash on the Sandringham marshes and the legal files from the February 19th arrest grow thicker, the man formerly known as the Duke of York faces a winter more isolated than any he's ever known. With no titles, no military honours, and now no partner by his side, the silence of the Norfolk wetlands is a far cry from the bustling corridors of Windsor. It's a stark reminder that in the new royal era, status isn't a birthright, it's a privilege that can be revoked at any time. But is this farmhouse a temporary cage, or is it the final stop in a journey that once had the throne in its sights? As the investigation into the Epstein documents continues to reveal new damaging secrets, many wonder if the royal doghouse at Marsh Farm is actually a form of protection, the only way to keep the monarchy's biggest liability from sinking the entire ship.